So working in a walk-in closet actually has its perks because I record videos and there's clothing like on two sides of me. It kind of muffles things. It's great. Less noise from the kids. My name is Daniel Kelly. I am the lead instructor at Vue School. Been there for about 3 years now. Before I was a full stack developer, probably like a lot of you in this room. So I'm also a husband and a father. It's very nice to meet you all. Very nice to be here. Now on to more important things, and that is talking about common mistakes in Vue.js. In my position as an educator, I kind of get a special bird's eye view of a lot of people's mistakes, and guess what? I've made plenty myself in 10 years. So today I want to share with you some of the most common mistakes I've seen, and more importantly, show you how you can avoid them. All right, so very quickly, why did I choose this topic? Well, number one, we're all human and we all make mistakes. The AI hasn't solved it yet, right? Number two, and most importantly, even the smallest, simplest mistakes can cause a lot of time lost and a big headache. And who doesn't want to avoid that? I remember back when I worked with PHP a whole lot more, there was a guy, wasn't me, but there was a guy on my team who left out a semicolon and pushed to production and everything failed. Yes, our practices were very poor, but you know how long it took him to find that missing semicolon? I want you to be able to learn from the mistakes of other people so you don't have to feel this yourself. So I think this is a very practical topic. Let's dive right in. Mistake number one. Who can tell me what is wrong with this simple piece of code? Anybody, go ahead and yell it out. Using the index as the key. All right. So you absolutely should not use your index as a key with v4. A lot of us have been conditioned at this point by ESLint to provide that key, right? However, I've seen a lot of people get rid of that red squiggly line by slapping the index on there. And I'm not just talking about juniors. I'm talking about senior devs that I've seen do this as well. Some of you might be thinking, well, I did this just this past week and there wasn't any real issue. So why can't I do it? Well, here's the tricky thing about this mistake. It only actually manifests a bug under 2 certain conditions. And I apologize, y'all. I'm going to make sure I'm staying on time, so I'm getting my phone out here. So the bug only manifests when both of these things occur at the same time. Number one, when the elements in the array that you're looping over change order in some way. That doesn't mean you've necessarily shuffled them all. It might just mean you insert a new item somewhere in the middle and everything below shifts, right? Or vice versa, you take something out. So that's condition number one. Condition number 2 is when a nested element within that v4 or component contains its own internal state. What do I mean by that? I mean a component that has a ref in it or an HTML form element that contains a value. Okay? What I'm saying is that this is a tricky problem to solve. If I've got any 90s folks out there, then you might know what this is, or you might just see this as my really poor taste in video games. All right, let's take a look at an example that makes this more clear. So, here in my code base, I have an array of Pokemons. I had to do Pokemons because you have to have an individual item, right? So, I've got Pokemons here, and then down in my template, I have for Pokemon in Pokemons, and I'm doing the poor thing. I'm providing the index as the key, but inside of this, I'm just printing out each individual Pokemon, right? Okay, so let's see what this looks like in the browser. All right, we have each of the different Pokemon printed on the screen. I'm going to hit the shuffle button, which shuffles that Pokemon's array. And everything works just fine. So this is great for those people who say, yeah, I use index as key all the time. It's not a problem. Right? Well, the problem is we've only met a single one of the conditions, the first one. Let's take a look at another example that's exactly the same as the prior, except for one small difference. Now, instead of printing out a Pokemon within the v4, we've got a Pokemon card. Our code has evolved much like it would do in real life, right? So what does this Pokemon card include? Well, if I open it up, you'll see it's using useFetch, which is a built-in Nuxt composable, in order to grab some data from an API, and it's setting that data back to a local variable. Now we have local state within our Pokemon card component. So what does this look like in the browser? Looks better. We've evolved our code. Things are looking good. Shuffle it anymore. I promise I'm hitting the button. All right, nothing is happening. Well, so what do we do about this? I've seen some people at this point come into the Pokemon card component. They'll come and they'll watch the Pokemon, then they'll go refetch the data and all this. And it's just completely unnecessary code. It's complex. It's more requests than you really should ever be made. The simple answer is you just change the key to something that's actually unique for each item in the array. So that, pardon the pun perhaps, but that's the key to a key attribute. It has to identify something unique about the item, not its position in the array. Okay, if you're getting data from a database, that's usually going to be an ID property, right? But for this, it's just the individual Pokemon. So now you can see everything shuffles just fine. Notice though that it also has this nice transition effect to it. This is all thanks to this lovely v-auto-animate directive that ships from the FormKit team. This is a super easy way to add animations really quickly to your projects. But I do want you to note, back in my very first example, it didn't auto-animate, but I had the same directive on there. It's actually another little hidden bug because I didn't do what? Provide a proper key, right? The moral of the story is make sure you're providing a proper key for your v-for loops. Awesome. Another mistake I see people make when working with the key is thinking that it's only useful with v-for. It's actually not. It has a wide range of use cases. Basically, anytime you want to force an element or component to re-render, all you have to do is throw a key on there and change the value of that key. Every time the value of that key changes, the re-render will be forced. What's a practical example of that? Well, here I have a counter. It just ticks every 1 second, okay? And notice it has a transition wrapping it. And I do promise that the proper styles have been added to that transition to make it work appropriately. But what does this look like in the browser? It looks like this. No transition. Fail. Okay, so what's going on here? Well, Vue is actually just patching the text node of that div with the new number, and so there's never two divs on the page at one time to transition between. So how do we force that? How do we force it to recognize, hey, this is one div for the old number and a new div for the new number? Easy. You just add a key. Great. And then the transition works swimmingly. Okay, so that's mistake number 1. Let's go to mistake number 2 now. Can anybody tell me what's wrong with this piece of code? Go ahead, yell it out. What is it? It's 3 lines. Come on. Anybody? It's not reactive. Awesome. So that's exactly right. We're relying on a non-reactive value to be a dependency for this computed prop. So no matter how many times I update this item in local storage, the computed prop is never, ever, ever going to change. The tricky part is it's right the very first time. Every subsequent time, it's the cached version, right? So all of us understand that this won't work. But for some reason, when we start working with browser APIs and native JavaScript APIs, we absolutely lose our freaking minds, and we just think stuff like this will work as expected, but it doesn't. Okay? At least that's my experience from what I see people doing. So I often see people make this mistake with browser APIs like local storage, things like the date function, things like DOM elements with client width, client height properties. I've seen it happen and done it more times than I would like to admit. And of course, this problem usually hides in much more complex computed properties than the one I showed you here as an example. So, what's the solution to this common mistake? Well, since most of the time this comes up with browser APIs, a really good way to avoid it altogether is by using Vue.js. Okay, Vue.js is a handy reactive wrapper around a number of browser APIs, among other things. But this is one of the areas that it really shines, and I love using it in my projects. So let's take a quick look at an example where we could use Vue.js to have reactive local storage instead of doing things the wrong way. So here we call use local storage, which comes from Vue.js core, which, by the way, I'm in a Nux project, so I actually don't even have to import this because auto imports are awesome. And then I define the key that I want it to be saved in browser storage or in local storage. I give it a default value. And then return from this use local storage function is a reactive thing. Now I can work in Vue land with a native browser API without having to jump through hoops. Okay, let's take a quick look at an example of this in the browser. So we're looking at, number 3. This is 3, right? Nope, this is number 2. Okay, so here we have true displaying in the checkbox. Because I've already done this in my local storage, it is set to true. If I search for cookie, yeah, you can see that it's true here. But if I toggle it, notice that it also changes in local storage. But the really cool thing is, even if this changes in local storage, the page re-renders as well. So there's a lot of juggling or mistakes that we could have made if we had not just reached for Vue.js. Excellent. Let's take a look now at mistake number 3. Can anybody tell me what's going wrong in this example? I'll give you a little bit longer. It's a few more lines, but yell it out when you see it. Reactive can't be an object? No. I'm replacing it. That's it. This is it. I am replacing reactive with a completely new value. Okay? Be honest with me. Did you know this was a problem? Raise your hand. Did you know this was a problem? Okay. I've got about a third, maybe half. We even got Ken over here saying, yeah, duh. Them forward slashes. Okay. So here's the thing. If Ken had read the official documentation, he would know this is a problem. But most of us don't read, so we didn't know that this was a problem. Okay, so let's take a look at an example of this in some code. Here we got the exact same setup as in the slide. We have some posts here. You can imagine these are coming from an API. And when this load more function is called, we're reassigning that post to these new posts from the API. Awesome. What does that look like in the browser? I hit load more, the function runs, nothing happens, no surprise. Okay, so why really spend time on this at a talk at VueConf? You asked Daniel. Obviously, we know this won't work. Well, once again, sometimes this can get a little bit tricky. Let's take a look at a very similar scenario, but this time we're doing something that a lot of you have probably done before, and now we're keeping up with some loading state. And inside of our load more function, now we're setting loading.value to true. We load in our new post. We replace poorly, the wrong way, the mistake, our post with the new post, but then we set loading.value back to false. Inside of the template, we only show the new post when we're not loading. When we're loading, we show a loading indicator, right? So this is not going to work in the browser, right? Hit load more. Oh, suddenly I can replace the entire reactive array. Well, not really. you see what's going on here is that the template is re-rendering not because posts change. Vue had no idea that posts changed. Vue only knew that loading changed, and so it triggered the re-render. So you might be lulled into a false sense of security at this point that replacing the whole post actually works. But if you look really closely, you'll notice a little hint telling you that it did not. Okay, we have a computed prop that gives us the total number of posts. You can see it's still stuck at 2. Okay? All right. Moral of the story here is just use ref everywhere. Ditch reactive, stick with ref. All right? Once again, Vue.js docs says something extremely similar. The recommended way to declare reactive state is using the ref function. Awesome. Oh, and one more reason just to use ref everywhere. Your default watcher depth is actually different between ref and reactive. One defaults to deep watching, the other does not. Don't ask me which one it is because I don't know. That's too much for my mind to keep up with. I just use ref. Awesome. All right, so last mistake we're going to talk about together can be seen in this little example here. Once again, yell it out. What is the problem? Y'all know the drill. Mutating props. Okay, exactly right. Here we are very apparently mutating a prop. So let's take a look at an example of this in some code, see how that runs, and see how things might get a little bit tricky along the way. So here I have an example where we have some data being defined in a parent. That data goes down via vModel into a myInput component. If I open up the myInput component, you'll see that it does indeed take model value, but we're then directly mutating that model value. So what happens when I try to open this in the browser? Obviously, there's a mistake. And Vue tells me very clearly what it is. vModel cannot be used on a prop because local prop bindings are not writable. This is great. No reason for me to talk about this. Vue's got my back. So first of all, what's the solution to this? And then let's see how it might get a little bit more tricky. So the solution to this simple mistake is just reaching for the new define model macro that came out in Vue 3.4. Is that right? 3.4? Yeah. Okay. And now essentially whenever we mutate this model value variable here, it doesn't actually mutate the prop. Instead, it emits an event. And this is exactly the flow control that we want being Vue devs, right? We want props down, events up. And if I come back over here and then run this page once again, number 4, it doesn't want to go there because I made it error out a moment ago, I believe. Let's give it one more go here. There it is. Okay. So now when I type into the child component, yes, it does indeed emit the event to the parent. That one's, once again, fairly obvious, but how can this get a little bit more tricky? Well, here I have some data defined with the parent, which is not a string. It's no longer simple data. Now it's an object. All right, this object is going to go down as a prop into a form component. And then when this form component emits a submit event, only then do I want to update the data in the parent. Okay? This is actually a fairly common pattern I use for my own forms. Although instead of doing data and at submit, I'll actually do a vModel. But let's take a look at the form component now and see where the fail is happening. So here I'm even using TypeScript to describe the shape of that data prop, which is a great call. But down inside of my template, I am directly mutating the properties on that data, right? Somebody's shaking their head over there. You shouldn't do that, right? And he's right. This is mutating your prop, and it's not following the proper flow for communication between Vue components. So I should get the error in the browser, right? I didn't. It was not near as apparent as that last issue. In fact, there's no warning at all. But if I start typing in my username here, you'll see I am indeed violating that flow of props down, events up, because the parent is being mutated. The data in the parent is being mutated. When I first started Vue, okay, that's a lie. For like the first year I wrote Vue code, I did this literally all the time, and me and my colleagues would just say, oh, that's just Vue being overreactive. Okay, we had no idea what was going on. And we ended up just doing this all the time. But it makes your components more unpredictable, right? Because you're not following the proper flow. So what is the solution? Well, now we should actually define some local data that we can mutate to our heart's content, right? So I'll do that, and then I'll just initialize its data to that from the prop. And then I'll just do that mutating on my local data instead of the prop. And of course, when I submit the form, I want to submit my local data back up again. Okay, everything is now right in the world. I start typing. It's still happening. What? I thought I just fixed the issue. Does anybody know what's going on here? Yes. So objects, unlike strings, unlike numbers, objects are passed by reference and not by value. And so whenever I update the value of my local data object, the parent data object updates as well. So the solution to this then is to clone, and one of the easiest ways to do that is with JSON stringify and JSON parse. All right, and there's other solutions out there as well. This one is just very quick to do. So the moral of the story here is, if you're accepting an object as a prop, remember, you're going to want to clone that, or else you're going to end up doing something you didn't intend to do. So now I type in username. It doesn't update in the parent. Only when I hit login and submit that event does the parent get updated. Great. All is right again in the world. So the mistakes that I shared with you all today are only a sampling of mistakes that we go over in this course called Common Vue.js Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. This is a completely free course available at Vue School. I'm really proud of this course. It's helped a lot of people. I've got a lot of good feedback about it. But it goes over some of the same mistakes that we've made today, talked about today, but also a ton of others like prop drilling, forgetting to clean up manual event listeners, calling composables in the wrong place. Did you know there was places you shouldn't call a composable? Using VHTML, using the with user-provided data. All right, so that's all for talking about Vue mistakes. But before I go, I do want to quickly mention just a couple things on behalf of Vue School. We have worked very hard on the Vue.js certification and made it available to everyone to help them validate their own skills, not just in their eyes, but in the eyes of potential employers as well. That is available right now. It is no namby-pamby exam. It is hard, all right? 83% of people who took it say it is moderate to difficult, and we made it that way on purpose so that you can have the utmost confidence and potential employers can have the utmost confidence. In fact, 74% of developers said it even helped improve their Vue.js skills, which I think is pretty cool. We had somebody who works on a fairly popular Vue.js component library come to one of our boot camps, and I actually heard from him that he learned quite a lot from the boot camp. This is somebody who writes libraries that some of us are probably using. That's pretty cool. There's always more to learn about Vue. We also have the Next certification now available for pre-order. And we also have the largest front-end conference online, completely free, starting in just a few weeks. We've got over 60 plus speakers from all different kinds of front-end flavors speaking there. It's not just Vue, it's also Angular, it's also React, it's also Tailwind, styling, all sorts of things, AI, and things like that. If you haven't had the chance to come visit the Vue School team, we do have a booth open in the mall area there in the back. We would love to get to meet you and, of course, give you some swag. We've got stickers, t-shirts, and all the cool stuff. I'm Daniel Kelly, IO on Twitter. If you want the slides or the code base that I shared during this talk to review further, give me a follow. I will tweet it out there after I am off stage. Thank you so all very much for your time. Thank you.